Hi, this is Katie.
And this is Nathan, and you're listening to Queen's Podcast. Kind of.
Hey, y'all. If you're a longtime listener of the podcast, you know that we are on summer break right now.
But we didn't want to leave you all high and dry.
Over the years, a few of you have mentioned that you'd like to share our show with your kids or with a classroom.
I believe the children are our future.
But you couldn't because of the language, because we are saucy.
Yeah, we curse like sailors. So this summer, we're taking a few of our classic episodes and making them a little less saucy for y'all.
So enjoy Queen's Podcast, rated PG-13, the summer series.
Cheers, kids.
Nathan.
Katie.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited to record this episode.
Me too. I've been looking forward to this one for a while because she's like lesser known. And so I'm really excited because I'm pretty sure we're introducing her to a lot of our listeners.
I hope everyone finds her as fascinating as I did, because I had never heard of her before we started researching her. Had you?
No, I hadn't. And I remember just going down the list of our like novel of list of women that it's so long. And I was like, I have never heard of this woman. I want to look into her. And then I immediately started reading and I was like, yes, she's the one that I want to do. We're going to do her next. So I'm super stoked about it.
And who is she, Nathan?
Sayyida Al Hurra.
Who was Sayyida?
So she was the queen of Tetuan and quote unquote pirate queen of the Mediterranean. Sayyida was the last woman to serve as queen in Islamic history, and she was one of a few strong Muslim women who rose to power. But she did it during a really scary time for people of faith for Islam. It's called the Reconquista. Yes. I think we covered it in our Isabel of Castile episode.
It's a very genocide-y time for Spain.
Truth.
So let's dive in. First, Nathan, why don't you give us a refresher on what the Reconquista is? We have established it was genocide-y, but besides that, what was it?
Yes. So it was a series of battles between the Christians and Muslims to control the Iberian Peninsula. So that's what we know now as Spain, Portugal. So this was a big theme in our second Isabella of Castile episode. Isabella basically saw it as like her personal mission from God to take Granada and make Spain all Christian again. Sucka.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we love our girl Isabella, but she's not perfect.
No, like we said, they got a little genocide-y, and it was particularly aimed at Muslims and Jewish people, and they basically forced them out of Spain. So the Spanish were like capturing and torturing Muslims, and the Jewish into becoming Christians. So, if you just so happen to escape, you GTFO'd.
Yeah. And so all that, this is around the time that all the Muslims and most of the Jews, that didn't want to convert, they got out, and a lot of them fled to Northern Africa.
Yeah.
So it's just right there.
The Inquisition. What is that? The Inquisition. Sorry, go ahead.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of singing in this episode.
One, there is going to be a lot.
This is also the time when Istanbul was Constantinople. Istanbul was Constantinople. I love that song.
So in case you haven't heard of when Istanbul was Constantinople, it was the Ottoman Empire seizing control of modern-day Turkey and lots of northern Africa from the Byzantine Empire.
Right. This is the same empire that our girl Olga of Kiev was under. But this wasn't really in her reign. It's like the Roman Empire for the 1400s, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
The Muslims are fleeing Western Europe, while the Islamic Ottomans were fighting the remnants of the old Roman Empire. We're just setting the scene that in the Mediterranean, things are tense.
Yeah, that's an understatement. And I mean, this is the time, like we were talking about, this is Elizabeth of York's time too. So you also have like the War of the Roses just wrapped. This is a really, you completely forget about what's going on in the Middle East whenever there's so much going on in England. I mean, this is a really scary time. Sayyida was born likely in 1485. But there's also accounts of her being born as late as 1495. And like many of our women, the birth of a girl wasn't really documented.
Yeah, it was like, why would we need to know when she was born? Why would we even need to know what decade she was born
who
in?
cares? I mean, I tend to lean into her being older, so born in 1485.
I feel like that fits a lot better with the timeline that we'll discuss.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we didn't even know her name at birth. Like Sayyida Al Hurra is like a title, not really a name. We'll get to that a little bit later. But some people think that her name was Aisha at birth, but we really just don't know. So
it's kind of like Empress Wu.
Yes.
How her name changed throughout her life. But just for consistency's sake, and because this is what she's known as by most historians, we're going to just call her Sayyida.
But she was born in Granada, which is why we used pomegranate in this recipe. Mm-hmm. So she was born in Granada to a really wealthy, noble, Andalusian family. Nailed it. Granada architecture, like I looked it up, it's gorgeous. It's like this mixture between like medieval Europe and Middle Eastern style. Oh my God. I want to go there so bad.
I know, I do too. It sounded like it was just gorgeous architecture. I'm sure it still is, but the way it was described back then just seemed like such a blended culture until the Christians. But anyway,
surprise!
Her dad was this guy named Moulay Ali ibn Rashid. He's part of that nobility there in Granada. He's basically like a lord.
Yeah.
Like in Western equivalents.
Yeah, and I read that he was actually a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. Yeah, he's kind of a
no big deal.
No big deal. He was descended from Muhammad's grandson Idris, who found the first Islamic dynasty in Morocco, which might be important later, and is also why our cocktail is the cocktail we have. Her mom, Zora Fernandez, was a Christian convert to Islam.
I wish that we could have found more on her mother, because I feel like you don't really hear about, in this time period, people switching religions like that.
Yeah, from like Christianity to Islam.
Yeah, like maybe in a couple more decades or another century, you might hear somebody going from Catholic to Lutheranism, but that's still Christianity. You don't hear a lot of these people. So I wanted to know, like, what's the story there? Was she, because Fernandez usually means like son of Ferdinand. So like, who was she related to? But I couldn't find anything, but it would have been cool to know.
Right. So she likely lived in Granada up until she was 6 or 7. So that's when Ferdinand and Isabella decided to like get all murdery and tortury,
like famous pacifist Jesus would have wanted.
Right. Her family was pushed out of Granada in 1492, and they were forced to flee. They fled to Northwest Africa like other Muslims did, and landed in Chefchaouen. This is a city-state in modern-day Morocco. Told you it would be important later, our Moroccan martini. So I'm 100% sure that being forced out of her home made Sayyida like bitter AF towards all the Portuguese and Spanish. So this is why I lean into her being like born in 1485, because that makes her old enough to remember having to flee Granada. So it would be like this, she has that personal vendetta against them.
I agree, because for the rest of her life, she, like you said, she has a vendetta. And if she was only like 3 when this was happening, she might not remember. 6 and 7, that's like your formative years. And so she would have seen, I'm sure her mother was emotional. She saw like her home being turned upside down. And I'm sure people said really nasty stuff about the Spaniards and, that she could hear. So without a doubt, she is raised with just this bitter taste in her mouth towards Ferdinand and Isabella.
Can you honestly blame her? I would be too. If you forced me out of my hometown at a young age, I would hate you.
So they flee to Morocco. And yeah, like you said, they end up in Chefchaouen, which wasn't a bougie place. Like it was a downgrade from the beautiful, illustrious city of Granada.
Mm-hmm.
It had been like a military base previously. After the Castilians had, like, a few decades earlier, the Castilians had thrown a temper tantrum and destroyed the city. And so, like, it was kind of ruins. Like, they weren't moving into a nice place.
Yeah. So when they fled Spain, it was more or less the people of Morocco were like, well, I mean, it is kind of and it's in ruins. So no one else is using it. I guess you can have it.
Yeah.
You know,
it's all that was available, so they took it.
Yeah.
They didn't have a whole lot of options.
Right.
They weren't like house hunting with a big budget, you know. It was just sort of like, this is what you can have. Her mom and dad and like their contemporaries, like that generation, like completely rebuilt the city. They opened their gates to Muslims or Jewish people because, you know, they all had this common enemy. And so it kind of became like a city of refugees.
Yeah. And whenever I was researching, they called it immigrants. And I was like, okay, I feel like immigrants choose to go to another country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
These people didn't have much of a choice. It was like either you're Muslim in another country or you're dead. You know, so it's like,
I completely agree that refugee is a much better term.
And one thing that I really loved about this hometown of hers was that all of the houses were painted blue, so much so,
and it's still like that.
Yeah, and it's called the quote unquote Blue Pearl. I'm just imagining their HOA being up. It's like, I want to plant a new tree, and they're like, but is it blue?
Is it blue? Is it going to have blue flowers? I know, but it looks gorgeous. I've wanted to go to Morocco for a while now.
Me too.
Ever since like season 2 of 90 Day Fiance.
Your life is measured in 90 Day Fiance.
But I've wanted to go ever since, and I didn't even know about the Blue City. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to go so bad. It just looks beautiful.
Oh, I know.
Back to Sayyida, her education. She had a bomb's education, and not just for a girl at the time, like in general. Like she could speak all these languages, and it was just really impressive. I don't know. I couldn't really find if that was the norm in Islamic cultures at the time, or if her parents were just progressive. I really couldn't find an answer to that.
Me neither. I mean, I would imagine that they have to be somewhat progressive because, I mean, at this time, a woman's education wasn't really invested in, but she's a royal, basically, you know?
Yeah.
She's, you know, somebody of prominence. So I'm sure it was a really great education. She would have learned math, theology, architecture. She was appointed like a bunch of scholars to be her tutors. One of which was the renowned Moroccan scholar and architect Abdallah Al-Ghazwani. I found this interesting. This is a really cool story. Al-Ghazwani's father met Sayyida, and he laid his hand on her head and said, "This girl will rise high in rank." And
hell yeah.
Right. And Al-Ghazwani was also considered one of the 7 saints of Marrakesh in Sufism. So like he's a pretty well-known guy, and his dad is telling this little girl that she's going to be somebody someday. So we can safely assume that Sayyida likely, you know, leaned into Sufism in terms of her religion and really took a lot from this scholar.
I just love stories like that because it's just like, is it prophecy, or did him just saying that give this little girl like a boost of confidence that then it's, you know, I'm sure it didn't hurt her confidence hearing this great scholar say that she was, you know, going to be someone important one day. But I wonder if what I'm getting at is tell your children they can do great things.
If you want to be somebody, If you wanna go somewhere, you better wake up and pay attention. It's very, very.
All right, Whoopi, bring it in. Bring it in, Whoopi.
Reel it in.
So tell me more about Sufism.
I found this really interesting, and this is a reason that I like to research, women that didn't grow up in England, or Spain, because I get to read about other religions. And so Sufism is an individual inner practice of Islam. Islam believes that Jesus was a prophet and believes that what he says was the word of God, but they believe that there's an extra prophet that came later named Muhammad, and he just added a bunch of extra to that religion. People who practice Sufism in particular are trying to perfect worship and prayers as these like sacred acts. They're really into like chants and music, and they prayed with beads. They are this form of mystical Islam where they're minimalist. So think a Buddhist monk on top of that. So you've got an evangelical Catholic Buddhist monk.
All right.
So her education would have been very practical and religious, which was not uncommon for a lot of our queens that we've covered, because go figure, give a girl an education and she can go far. Oh, what a concept.
Surprise. Just like most of our other queens, when you're a single young female, it's time to set you up with a bougie marriage arrangement.
All single ladies.
Now, this is going to get kind of weird because historians don't really agree on who her first husband was or when they married. Some say she was married in 1501, and some say it was 1510. So she could have been 16 or 26.
Big gap there.
Right. I tend to believe that she was married in 1501 when she was 16, but that's just like my gut. That's just what I think. So the dude that she married, Abu Hassan al-Mandari, he was the governor of Tetuan and 30 years older than her. So some people are like, actually, she married al-Mandari's son. They can't agree on that, but I think she married the father. I think she was 16, married a guy in his 40s.
See, I really want to think that maybe she was 26, because then that makes it less creepy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still 30 years older, but like I feel like a 26-year-old dating a 56-year-old isn't as bad as a 16-year-old dating a 46-year-old. What?
Yeah, but realistically,
we've seen worse.
Yeah.
So we know she had at least one brother, because at the same time Sayyida was being married off, we know her brother is sent to go to work for the Sultan. This dude was named Ahmed al-Watasi. So maybe that name will
he'll be important later.
Maybe. Either way, it shows that this family is making sure that they're getting those connections, putting, those high friends in high places, making sure that all of the family is connected.
So this marriage, was it a love match? Probably not.
Yeah.
We don't really know how they felt about each other because there's not like anything documented, but I just from like the context clues that we're about to talk about, I definitely think it was a relationship built on respect.
Yes.
It wasn't we've seen women with much worse situations than what we're about to describe.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
He treated her as a co-regent.
Mm-hmm.
And like in everything he did, she was equal to him. I mean, he may have been a lot older than her, but he didn't treat her like a child. He didn't treat her like inferior because she was a woman. And, if he had to like go off and, business or whatever in another town, he'd left her in charge, like never with a second thought. So the people of Tetuan grew to respect her the same way as well.
Yeah. And what I found really interesting is that even Sayyida's family really valued and trusted her opinion on all sorts of ranges of issues, government, rebuilding, all of those things, which is super awesome.
I love it.
I know, it's like finally someone that has like some female empowerment in their family. Awesome.
Yes. Mm-hmm. My guess is, they they probably loved each other. It may have not been like a romantic love. It may have been more like, like I said, like relationship of respect, maybe like a teacher pupil kind of situation. Mm-hmm. I don't think they had any children. If they did, it's not documented. We know he had children from a previous relationship.
Yes, but there's nothing about her ever having children. And it's like, she probably did. It's probably just a girl.
Their relationship maybe just wasn't sexual. Maybe he'd already had his kids and was like, well, I don't need more kids.
Yeah.
So who knows?
But as the governor's wife, she's super active with her husband in rebuilding Tetuan, which was this former military fortress that was run down. I mean, it was just like the city that she grew up in.
It was like a sister city. Yeah, they both were old military.
Yeah. Tetuan is a port city located about 40 miles north of her African hometown. So yeah, like you said, sister city. Their first order of business was to build the wall around the city to protect themselves from those pesky Spaniards and Portuguese.
I mean, yes, they had a reason.
They were run out of their hometown by the Spaniards and the Portuguese. They're trying to, now they keep chasing them. We ran away from you for a reason.
This is one situation where I'm like, okay, the wall makes sense.
Yeah, right? Agreed. So they then fill the city with, homes, agriculture, to rebuild a thriving society. The slogan, make Tetuan great again, honey.
Unfortunately, her husband dies in either 1515 or 1519. Sayyida just kind of like looks around and she's like, instead of us like having to switch regimes, what if I just kind of take over what he was doing? And everyone just kind of went,
I love it, but like everyone's like, okay. Go ahead. Like, that speaks to her. Like, everybody in her own, they're like, yeah, she's been doing a great job so far. I don't know.
It was like almost just viewed as like, it makes the most sense. Nothing will change for us on our day to day because it's like the same regime, just switching from the husband to the wife. And she's been so active for so long anyway. And they know her, they know what to expect. They trust her. I wonder if, because all these people are refugees from Spain, where it's not an issue for women to inherit like it is like in France and England and stuff. I wonder if that also has to do with it, just like a cultural thing.
Yeah, I'm sure it does, because Isabella was like, hey, I'm a queen.
Yeah, and everyone was just like, yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm. This is when she actually earns the title Al Hurra, which means queen, basically. So her full title would have been Sayyida Al Hurra, more or less translating into royal lady who is free and independent. Yes, I-N-D-E-P-E-N-D-E-N-T. Do you know what that means, man?
I love it. L-O-V-E. And so she looks around and she's like, I want to rock this new role. I need to get some money for this town. There is money out there and we need it in here. So she really wants to make Tetuan stand out and become like this just powerful force to be reckoned with. Also, she would like outsiders to fear her.
Yeah, because, that makes sense. She doesn't want them invading her city, so...
She doesn't want people just assuming that she's this woman that's going to just take from people, because she's not. If they thought that, they don't know her. And so she was like, all right, so I need money, and I need some powerful friends. I need to be scary. So obviously she turns to piracy.
I love it. Like, it's like, what do I do? Become a pirate. That's what.
Pirate, yeah. So she's known as being a pirate queen, though I do want to like say that I don't think she ever actually like stepped foot on a pirate ship.
Yeah.
But she was like the manager. She was like the general manager. She was the GM for the pirates.
And this is also a way for her to get back at Ferdinand and Isabella, because that's who she's going after. She's telling other pirates to go invade their ships, take them hostage, take their booty, and there's going to be a lot of booty jokes in this.
Booty.
So she wants a piece of that money, and honestly, she really wants to stick it to him. I mean,
right?
You can get rich and spit in your enemy's eyes. Win-win.
Yeah. And now people are going to fear you. Win-win-win.
Right? And I mean, the city of Tetuan actually had a rich history of piracy even before the Reconquista and before she'd ever gotten there. So it had been a huge hub of for piracy, but the Castilians, aka Queen Isabella's relatives, had to come in and destroy the town and kill all the pirates.
Right.
Murdery and genocide-y. There you go. So our girl Sayyida was like, okay, we've got this wall around the town now. I think we can try our hand at this again. Over the next quarter century, Tetuan, quote unquote, reached an unheard of level of prosperity. Thanks to all that golden booty. Golden booty.
So she is rich.
Yes.
From her work with the pirates, which we'll dive into in a little bit, like she brought so much wealth to Tetuan and herself. Tetuan, seriously, rags to riches story.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Can I sing my song?
Yes.
Can I sing my song
Yes.
I've been singing all week?
Yes.
We built this city. Boom, boom. We built this city with Spanish gold.
Yes. I love it. I've actually had that song stuck in my head too.
Oh my God. Y'all, I've been annoying Nathan singing that song for like the last 2 weeks.
I wake up in the morning singing that.
With Spanish gold. Anyway.
So let's briefly touch on pirating in this time, because as us Americans should know, there were tons of Spanish ships that had been sailing back and forth to the Americas at this point. So this would have been during the times when the Spanish conquered those great Indian tribes, in Mexico and South America. Cortez just slaughtering all those Mayans and Pizarro just killing all those Inca Indians.
Not cash money.
No. And, when they slaughtered them, they would rape and pillage their towns. And as a result, had all of this gold and expensive jewels. So when the Spanish ships were making their way back, Sayyida's dudes are like laying low. So Sayyida would turn around and snatch those ships coming back to Spain and take all their gold they stole from the Native Americans, and then take the noble Spaniards that were on board hostage, and then hold them hostage for large sums of money. And this just kind of puts pirating into perspective. Queen Elizabeth I is said to have funded a major part of her rule through piracy. So, in my opinion, being a quote-unquote pirate just depends on what side of the battle you're on. Because I feel like Sayyida's doing this because she's really trying to stick it to him and be like, you forced me out of my country, so I'm going to steal all of your money.
And for money.
Yeah, that's what she's gonna. I'm gonna make you broke.
And I mean, if you look at where Morocco is, it's just so perfectly placed, because for them to not go anywhere near Morocco, they would basically have to add weeks to their journey. So it's just perfectly placed for them to be like, and I will take this, please, and thank you. I'm sure they said it exactly. They were very polite. They were like, excuse me.
Excuse me. I need to.
Excuse me, Spain.
I need to raid your booty.
Yeah, ooh.
I can't stop. So it also seems that maybe Sayyida is kind of holding out on the hope that if she screws over the Spanish enough, that she can move back home to Granada. So hoping that she'll get rich enough and powerful enough that she can buy the land back, which is actually really sad, because spoiler alert, not gonna happen.
Not gonna happen. So Sayyida is digging this piracy gig. She has found her calling. She's updating her LinkedIn, proficiency in pirate management, I guess I should say. Proficiency in pirate management.
She photoshops her headshot to have an eye patch on it.
Yeah. She's asking everybody for letters of recommendation. Absolutely. But she needs an ally. Mm-hmm. She's like, I need to make some friends with some other pirates so that we can I can branch out, basically.
Get more booty.
Yep. She wants to get more booty. So she needs some friends. She needs some booty friends. So she meets this guy named Oris Reyes, who is he's very well known in the pirate community of this time. He's an interesting figure.
Yeah, he was hired by the Ottoman Empire to loot the Spanish ships and get that money, honey. He was also a nicer guy because he ended up smuggling a lot of Muslim refugees from Spain to the Ottoman Empire. I mean, he is this scary, brutal pirate, but he has a soft spot for the underdog, which really makes him this dynamic and interesting figure.
It is really interesting, yeah, because everybody feared him, but he was also helping refugees. So cool. It's just a really dynamic character. I would like to one day learn more about him. His nickname was Baba Orus, which means Father Orus. But in Italian, Barbarossa, so maybe Italian or Spanish, in some European language, Barbarossa means Redbeard. So
let's talk a little bit briefly about Barbarossa, because this is such a fun rabbit hole for me.
It really is.
He and his brother were a famous pair of pirates born in Lesbos. So they are 100% lesbian. He grew up pirating and got paid to fight back against the Knight Hospitalier. So he would capture ships, hold people ransom, steal their booties. And he was so good at it that he gets a deal with Suleiman the Magnificent of the Ottoman Empire.
Roxalena's man.
Oh my gosh, there's so much overlap in this episode.
There's so much crossover. I love it.
So, also something really cool. He had a prosthetic arm made of silver. Because obviously, if you're a pirate, you have to lose one of your arms. You have to.
Right. That just blew my mind that he lost an arm in pirating. And I feel like I would have been like, well, I'm done being a pirate. I'm going to go find a desk job. 'Cause one arm. But he was just like, give me something real metal looking. Give me something real. And I'm going to just keep pirating with one arm. And
he was still apparently he was still a swordsman, even with his metal arm. He's very metal.
I feel like silver that'd be so heavy. That sounds like a horrible thing to use to make a prosthetic arm.
Because there's a photo of it online, and you can kind of see his left arm is metal. Yeah. I'm wondering maybe if it had a hollow center or something like that, because you're right, that would be super duper heavy. So Sayyida strikes an alliance with this guy, rule the Mediterranean. So she rules the Western Mediterranean, and he's they strike that deal. She gets the Western Mediterranean, he gets the East. So at this point, the city of Tetouan is thriving. They're stealing treasures.
So well.
Yeah, harboring refugees to build this city on Spanish gold.
Yes!
And again, they call her a pirate, but in my opinion, the Muslims are being tortured and killed and driven out of Granada, and so she's getting revenge, if anything.
A queen's got to do what a queen's got to do.
Yeah, and one of the major successes of Sayyida and Barbarossa was the raid on Gibraltar in or around 1540. So the Rock of Gibraltar is this Islamic relic, and this peninsula was a huge military advantage, because it's the port city that's next to that little piece of water between Africa and Spain. It's super important. And it's appropriately named the Strait of Gibraltar.
Very creative.
It was under the control of the Holy Roman Emperor of Charles V. So he was in his own state of mind. But for real, he's the son of Juan of Castile. So more crossover. Well, Charles got his degree in Shady Lady University, and
obviously
he offered to make Barbarossa the Lord of Gibraltar in return for Barbarossa to rebel against the Ottomans.
Charles V, he makes this proposal through a messenger, and he tells the messenger, if he doesn't take my deal, you need to go ahead and assassinate him on the spot, which is a little extreme. And I'm not quite sure if he didn't know who he was dealing with. Barbarossa got wind of this. Maybe Charles tweeted it or something and thought his account was private. And it was not. And so Barbarossa whenever the messenger is like, hey, we want you to do this, Barbarossa killed the messenger.
And I mean, like, unbeknownst to him, that actually saved his own life.
Right? Savage.
Love it. In 1540, there was this mass breakout of prisoners. So let's just say Gibraltar was a crumbling fortress, so it's pretty easy to escape. Well, Sayyida and Barbarossa rescue these prisoners and start to gather knowledge from them of the fortress. So they use this information to give them the upper hand for a raid. And
I just think it's really cool that they were like, yeah, the guards never look at this one place, or, you know, there's, I don't know, like the lock is broken on whatever. So they were able to get inside intel. And of course, the prisoners are going to give it to them because they've got a common enemy.
Yeah,
you know?
and they end up disguising themselves as Spaniards, and then they land in Gibraltar to like scout the city, which is
pretty sneaky, sis.
Long story short, Barbarossa assists Saida in the biggest raid of her life, and they capture a ton of prisoners that they ransom off for super high prices. And this goes without mentioning that a lot of golden relics and, drumroll please, booty!
Booty, 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 rocking everywhere.
So
so she grabs all the booty.
Yeah, she grabs all the booty. And Western European historians basically rewrote everything about this and was like, Gibraltar was successfully saved from the Ottomans. And it's like they weren't even trying to take it over.
Yeah.
They were just trying to get money. Like so needless to say, this gets her quite the reputation in Europe.
Yeah. It's like if people didn't know who she was before this, they know now.
Yeah, especially those men in power.
What? European men don't like powerful, headstrong women?
Qu'est-ce que c'est?
What brand new information this is. One Portuguese diplomat wrote that he prayed to God to allow them to see her hanging from a ship's mast.
That's severe.
That's very aggressive. They wrote that she was a bad-tempered woman and like just kind of had a nasty attitude about everything, which I mean, yeah, she's a ruthless woman who's out for blood because y'all stole her homeland. What were they like? I wish she would smile more. Seriously, if she had been a man, they wouldn't have mentioned her temperament like that.
Yeah, she would have been the badass that Barbarossa was. You know, they would have treated her like that. But
what was she supposed to do? Be like, gee, guys, oh, little old me. Oh, this booty. Oh, no. Like,
okay, but not every man was intimidated by her. One ruler fell in love with that reputation. And, you know, the Sultan. Yeah, and his name was Ahmad al-Watsi, which was the one that we mentioned earlier. He was the Sultan of Watsid, and he ended up proposing to her. We really don't know how old he was, but this is 1541. So she's late 40s, mid 50s. I'm really hoping that she was like a cougar.
I couldn't really find anything, but since we know that her brother has been working for him for like, because her brother is like one of his top advisors. Yeah. Remember when she married her first husband, her brother went off. Yeah. So he's probably at least her age, but a sultan, honey.
Yeah, even Philip II was nervous about this union, and he said it was giving him a Muslim Isabella and Ferdinand moment.
I mean, yeah. And so I just love that the Sultan's just like, powerful woman gonna make the Spaniards shake in their boots.
Yeah, because she's basically uniting, this marriage is uniting Morocco. And so it's very much that Isabella and Ferdinand uniting Spain. So the Europeans are like, holy shit, this is the power couple.
And one of them's a pirate. My favorite thing is that
I love this story.
The capital was this place called Fez. Every royal wedding, that's where the king lived. So the royal wedding always took place in Fez. And so he was like, do you want to marry me? And she was like, yeah. And he was like, cool, come to Fez. And she was like, about that, we're going to have our wedding in Tetuan, which had never happened before. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of precedence. And she's like, no, I need you to come to me. And he was just like, okay.
I mean, like, I'm living for this audacity. Like,
I love
she
it.
knew she was a badass. I mean, could you imagine if, like, Anne of Cleves would have been like, nah, Henry VIII, you
got to come to Cleves.
You come here. I mean, that would have changed everything.
Right?
And this is legit like a year after Anne of Cleves. So I'm sure Sayyida was like, I read this in ye old TMZ. I think you should come.
Right. So I just love that he was just like, okay,
yeah,
be there in a couple weeks. And he traveled over 150 miles.
And this is like mountain desert terrain. So this is not like, oh, I'm just going to walk downhill for 150 miles. No.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't an easy trip, and it wasn't a short trip.
No.
The marriage wasn't a love match. I don't think they ever lived together.
No.
Like, they had their wedding, and then he went back to Fez, and she stayed in Tetuan. So I don't...
It was a diplomatic wedding. Like, it was just diplomacy.
Yeah. So maybe they consummated it on their wedding night. We have no idea. Maybe it was just for a consolation, like combining powers.
Yeah. So we can safely assume that people took her seriously. She has this like infamous reputation, and she's seriously channeling like inner Joan Jett to me, because
she don't give a damn about a bad reputation.
This is like the musical version of Queens this episode.
Oh my God. We really need to write Sayyida Al Hurra, the musical.
Right? So they instructed the Sultan to come to her, and she was like, okay.
Love it.
And she hated the Portuguese. Like, after all, it was them and those pesky Spaniards that forced her out. And so at this point in history, Portugal and Spain are just so intertwined. They're basically the same.
And so the nearby city, Ceuta, had a really large Portuguese population. And that was also a city they did a lot of trade with.
Yeah, I looked it up, and even today, they are still considered an autonomous Spanish city. Like, this ain't your continent.
Africa.
This is not your continent. Get off my continent. Ugh.
And since Saida's got such bad blood, she refuses to do business with like this big booming city in her own continent. And that was really like, that was a bit shooting herself in the foot there.
Yeah, because you're cutting off a huge source of income by being like, oh, I'm not going to do business with New York City. You know, like, it's like, but there's so much money that you could make off of that. They say that it was her bad mood swings that led the Portuguese not to do business with her, which I think is misogyny.
Either way, that was a huge trading partner. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of merchants that lived in Tetuan that were like, wait, I'm happy to have my queen be the pirate, but I just want to do trade with the rich people at the city a couple of blocks over. Like, it didn't make sense financially to any of the people in her town. And so after, 30 something years, they kind of started to grumble about like, is she really fit? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And this really starts to have her empire start to fall apart. It starts to unravel at this point because just are getting restless. And by restless, I mean that they're like trying to start a rebellion. Her son-in-law. Ugh.
Okay. So son-in-law, everything that I read said like her son-in-law came in and is the one that overthrew her. This must be a son-in-law of one of her stepchildren from her first
That's what
marriage.
I was assuming. Either that or she had like a girl that nobody ever documented, but I really think it was like a son-in-law from the Sultan's previous marriage. You're right.
Yeah, I feel like if she had had children herself, she wouldn't have let them be non-documented just because they were girls, because of how she was raised,
Yeah, and I mean, this is... We talked about this also in our Roxelana episode. So the Sultan would have a bunch of sons, and these sons would be constantly trying to one-up each other and kill the other one to try to become the next ruler. So basically her dickhead son-in-law is doing exactly this. And so he aligns himself with this rival noble family, and then he builds up this small army. And they end up traveling to Tetuan and capture Sayyida, and they forced her to abdicate the throne.
And they had the support of the people because they were like, I need to feed my family. And some of that has to, like, I need to be able to trade with this city. I need to be able to trade with these people. So, like, I can't really hate on a lot of the people either.
Yeah, because their economy had declined so bad. So when they came to take her, she didn't really have any support. And so they just went in and swept her out. And, you know, regardless of being the queen for 30 years, Sayyida channeled her inner Dorothy, clicked her heel 3 times and repeated, "There's no place like Shefshuan. There's no place like Shefshuan. There's no place like Shefshuan." And she was just magically transported there. Okay, but
I love that for her. I hope it was kind of like, you know, like with Empress Wu, when they came in, they were like, "We're overthrowing you." And she was just sort of like, "Good, I'm tired." I hope it was.
I think that's a direct quote.
I hope it was peaceful like that. And she didn't go into her retirement as salty.
Yeah, she's in her late 50s. You know, she's ready to post up and retire.
She is still queen.
Mm-hmm.
She is still married to the Sultan.
Yeah, and she lived like the next 20 years of her life just chilling in Morocco until her death on July 14th of 1961. So
1961?
July 14th, 1461.
She lived a really long time, guys. She's a Highlander.
550 years old. She's a Highlander. Oh my God.
Let's chat about her legacy, because even though the details of her personal life are a little murky, we know that she was a strong-willed woman. Mm-hmm. She ruled as the leader of a thriving community for 30 years. I know she got overthrown in the end, but that's like, for like, and this woman to rule like this up and coming place like that, you know?
Yeah. And she even made the Europeans scared, which after what they did to her people, they deserved it. And there just aren't a whole lot of other women from this time, especially Islamic women, that can say that they rose to power like this. So, I mean, what else can we do but cheers to this spiteful pirate badass?
Raise a glass. Cheers to Sayyida. All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Catch y'all next time. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Nathan, I love you.
Love you.
So thanks for listening. If there's something you want to hear, just like hit us up.
You can email us at queenshistorypodcast@gmail.com.
Find us on Twitter. We're at queens_podcast. We're on SoundCloud and Stitcher.
And follow us on iTunes
follow us on Facebook.
Thanks, guys, for listening.
Cheers.
Bye, girl.
Clink, clink. Mwah.